The illegal B-25 that eliminated 3,000 men in 15 minutes. The most controversial airstrike of the Pacific. In the vast blue silence over the Pacific Ocean, a lone American bomber droned toward an island that would soon erupt in fire. It was a North American B-25 Mitchell, a medium bomber famous for the Doolittle raid, ground attacks, and anti-shipping strikes. But on this day, the B-25 wasn't flying a normal mission. Its pilot wasn't following official doctrine. He wasn't obeying the standard rules of engagement. And what he was about to do would become one of the most shocking and debated air attacks of the entire Pacific War. The U.S. Army Air Forces would later call it reckless. Historians would call it impossible. Survivors would call it terror. And the Japanese would remember it as the day hell fell from the sky. Because in just 15 minutes, one B-25 Mitchell wiped out nearly 3,000 soldiers, obliterated an entire landing force, and destroyed months of Japanese planning. And the worst part? The pilot did it using a tactic the U.S. military had officially banned. The man behind the attack, a pilot with nothing to lose. The story begins with a man named Lieutenant Cole, Paul Pappy Gunn, a legend in the Southwest Pacific. But legend might be too mild a word. He was a former airline pilot, master engineer, fearless tactician, and a man who hated rules almost as much as he hated the Japanese Empire. His unofficial motto was simple: if it works, do it. If it scares them, do it twice. To his superiors, Gunn was a problem. To his men, he was a hero. To the Japanese, he was a ghost they could never prepare for. Gunn had watched the early months of the Pacific War with growing frustration. The U.S. was losing air battles. Ground troops were retreating across the Philippines. Airfields were being overrun one by one. He believed the U.S. needed something more aggressive, more shocking, more devastating. So he built it himself. Literally. The illegal B-25, an aircraft that wasn't supposed to exist. The U.S. Army Air Forces had strict rules. Bombers were to drop bombs from altitude, avoid unnecessary risk, and follow established doctrine. Gunn ignored all of it. In a rough maintenance hangar in Australia, he tore open the nose of a B-25, ripped out the bombardier's compartment, and replaced it with a devastating array of forward-firing machine guns. 8 50 cal guns in the nose, 2 50 cal guns in side blister mounts, more 50s in the top turret. It was essentially a flying gun platform, a gunship bomber. High Command told him, "This is unauthorized. This is not how a bomber is meant to be used." Gunn replied, "Then I won't use it as a bomber." His B-25s weren't designed to carpet bomb from 20,000 feet. They were designed for something terrifying: ultra-low-level attacks, flying barely 50 feet above the water at speeds over 230 mph, blasting ships, barges, and soldiers with overwhelming firepower. This tactic was considered too dangerous, too aggressive, and too unconventional. It was banned for all standard bomber units. But Gunn wasn't standard. He was building a weapon for a new kind of war. The target: a Japanese force preparing for invasion. In early 1943, U.S. scouts reported alarming news. A massive Japanese reinforcement group, thousands of soldiers, officers, engineers, and support staff, was gathering on the island of Gasmata, preparing to move toward New Guinea. The Japanese intended to open a new offensive, secure the coastline, and crush American positions. The U.S. could not allow it. Normally, this would have required multiple bomber groups, fighter escorts, days of planning, coordinated naval strikes, and plenty of luck. But the island was heavily defended by anti-aircraft guns, coastal emplacements, radar stations, air patrols, machine gun nests, and jungle terrain that made standard bombing almost useless. Every commander expected a long, costly campaign. Pappy Gunn had another idea. He said simply, "Give me 6 B-25s. I'll take care of it." His superiors hesitated. Was it insane? Probably. Was it risky? Absolutely. Was it possible? Only for Pappy Gunn. To the final briefing. A plan no one believed could work. On the morning of the attack, Gunn briefed his crews. He outlined the most dangerous plan they had ever heard. Approach Guesmata at wave-top height. Fly under Japanese radar. Use the jungle trees as cover. Pop up only for direct gun runs. Avoid flak by being too low to target. Wipe out troops as they assembled on the beach. Destroy landing craft, barges, and supply dumps at point-blank range. A bombardier asked, "What altitude, sir?" Gunn answered, "If you hit a palm tree, you're too high." The crew stared at him. This wasn't a mission. This was suicide. But when Pappy Gunn gave an order, something happened that didn't make sense to anyone. The men trusted him. The takeoff toward the most devastating strike of 1943. At Osevin, Gunn and his modified B-25s lifted off. They flew low across the ocean, so low that the propellers threw up sheets of white spray. The Japanese radar operators saw nothing. The B-25s were hidden by the curvature of the earth and masked by coastal terrain. Every mile they flew, they broke another rule of American air doctrine. Every minute, they were seconds away from slamming into the water. But the crews followed Gunn, toward Guesmata, toward the force of thousands, toward a moment that would become one of the deadliest in the entire Pacific War. And in just a few minutes, 3,000 soldiers on that beach would be running for their lives, with nowhere to hide. The ambush from the sky. The Japanese force at Guesmata had gathered at dawn. Thousands of troops prepared for transport. Officers shouted orders. Engineers loaded crates. Rows of landing craft lined the shallow beaches, their engines rumbling in anticipation of the push toward New Guinea. For weeks, they had moved quietly. No American bombers had targeted them. No reconnaissance planes circled overhead. They assumed incorrectly that their buildup remained undetected. They believed the Americans were too far away, too weakened, too occupied elsewhere to strike a force this large, this fast. They weren't ready. They never knew what was coming. The approach. Under the radar, under the guns. The 6 B-25s flew so low now that their wingtips sliced through sea spray. Inside the lead aircraft, Pappy Gunn leaned forward, eyes locked on the coastline. He didn't touch his maps. He didn't need them. He had flown this coast dozens of times. The terrain rolled past at terrifying speed. Jagged coral, palm trees whipping overhead, white surf exploding against rocks, shimmering heat rising from the jungle. Every instinct in the crews told them to pull up to a safe altitude. Every nerve was screaming, "Too low, too low, too low." But Gunn stayed level. His B-25 roared forward, engines redlining, a beast made for one purpose, to rip the beach apart at point-blank range. Behind him, his other pilots locked into formation. They trusted him with their lives. The coastline rose ahead. Beyond it, thousands of Japanese troops were assembling in perfect formation for their final deployment. They were about to face a weapon they didn't even know existed. The pop-up from quiet to chaos. At the last possible moment, Gunn finally shouted, "Now!" 6 B-25s pulled up sharply, just enough to clear the tree line. Below them, a sea of helmets, uniforms, artillery, barges, supplies, a full infantry regiment assembled in neat rows. It was the worst possible moment for thousands of Japanese soldiers to be standing in the open. The B-25 crews could hardly believe their eyes. One gunner whispered, "My God, they're all just standing there." Then, Gunn's voice cut through the intercom. "Guns! Hot!" The first strike, a wall of 50 cal fire. Pappy Gunn squeezed the triggers. All 8 50 caliber guns in his modified nose erupted at once. A solid stream of fire that tore across the beach like a metal hurricane. The Japanese assembly dissolved instantly. Men dove for the ground. Others ran in every direction. Dozens fell in the first seconds, cut down before they even understood what was happening. The 5 B-25s behind Gunn opened fire too, each unleashing 8-12 forward, 50 cal machine guns, top turret guns, cheek guns, skipping fragmentation bombs, Parafrags, incendiaries. The air filled with gunfire so dense it sounded like continuous thunder. A survivor later wrote, "It was like the air turned into metal." Another said, "We thought a battleship was firing on us, but it was only aircraft." The beach erupts into fire. The B-25s strafed back and forth in long, deadly passes. They shredded troop columns, ammunition tents, fuel drums, radio trucks, landing barges, artillery pieces, officers' posts, supply crates. They detonated fuel depots, ammunition stacks, gasoline barrels, explosives hidden under tarps, mortar rounds, grenades, rifle ammunition. Each explosion set off a chain reaction. Fireballs lit up the shoreline, smoke rose in massive pillars. The ground jumped under the force of detonations. From the air, the Japanese position looked like it was dissolving. The barrels, boats, and men. Nothing survived. Hot .50 caliber rounds punched clean through landing craft. Wooden barges splintered into toothpicks. Metal ones buckled, burning like torches. Dozens of soldiers tried to push boats into the water, escaping the inferno on the beach. They never got far. Gunn dipped low, firing so close to the waves that his rounds sent fountains of water shooting upward. Every boat hit was instantly disabled. Engines smashed, fuel tanks exploding, hulls ripped open, crews thrown into the surf. Those who jumped overboard found the water turning red around them. The legendary parafrag strike. Then came the deadliest moment of the entire attack. Gunn deployed the weapon he specifically modified the B-25s for: parafragmentation bombs, parafrags. Small, lightweight bombs with parachutes, ideal for low-altitude attacks. Dropped from 5,100 feet, they didn't bury themselves in the sand like normal bombs. They stopped in the air just long enough to explode above the ground, right over clusters of men. Parafrags turned the beach into a killing zone. Shrapnel spread across. Trenches, tents, weapons pits, command posts, truck parks. Japanese troops had nowhere to hide. One American tail gunner later said, "You could see hundreds, just hundreds, running in every direction." Then the parafrags went off, and they stopped running. The Japanese break, total panic. The Japanese command structure fell apart immediately. Radios destroyed, officers killed, runners shot, artillery positions burning, troop formations shattered, thousands dead or wounded. Those who survived the initial blasts fled into the jungle, but the jungle caught fire too. The burning tents, fuel dumps, and ammunition stacks sent flames rolling into the trees. Pappy Gunn circled back, firing into the forest canopy to prevent regrouping. The island seemed to melt under the sustained attack. The final strafe. 15 minutes of hell. Less than 15 minutes had passed since the first shot, but in those 15 minutes, 3,000 men were killed or wounded, landing craft were destroyed, supplies wiped out, the invasion force dissolved. The Japanese plan for New Guinea died on that beach. The B-25s were low on ammo, but Gunn ordered one final run, a clean sweep down the length of the shoreline, guns blazing, marking the end of one of the most devastating short attacks of the war. Then, as smoke filled the sky behind them, the B-25s disappeared back over the treetops. The Japanese survivors stared after them in shock, unable to process what had just happened. The return flight, silence in the cockpit. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke for several minutes. The adrenaline was wearing off. Only the engines hummed. One co-pilot finally whispered, "Sir, did we really do that?" Gunn didn't answer. He knew the truth. They hadn't just destroyed an enemy force. They had changed the direction of an entire campaign. From the aftermath of an impossible victory. When Pappy Gunn's B-25s returned to base, their fuselages were streaked with salt spray, their barrels scorched black from constant firing, and their crews physically shaking from the intensity of the mission. Ground crew rushed to the planes, expecting battle damage, holes, or wounded airmen. Instead, what they found stunned them. Not a single B-25 had been hit, not by flak, not by machine gun fire, not even by stray rifle rounds. The Japanese never fired a meaningful shot. They simply never had the chance. The attack had been so sudden, so violent, and so overwhelming that the beach defenses collapsed before they could even react. It was as if death had come from nowhere, invisible, unstoppable, and gone before anyone knew what happened. The debriefing. Commanders in disbelief. When Gunn walked into the debriefing room, senior officers were waiting. They'd heard the radio chatter. They'd seen the smoke from miles away. But they didn't believe the reports. One colonel asked, "How many aircraft did you encounter?" "None." "How many anti-aircraft guns engaged you?" "None." "How long was the attack?" 15 minutes. "How many confirmed casualties?" Gunn paused. His reply was simple. "There's nothing left on that beach." A silence filled the room. Officers looked at each other, trying to understand what he meant. Then, the reconnaissance photos arrived, and jaws dropped. Reconnaissance photos. The proof hours later, P-38 photo reconnaissance aircraft passed over Gasmata. The images they returned with became some of the most jaw-dropping photographs of the entire Pacific War. They showed hundreds of bodies scattered across the sand, burning landing craft sinking into the water, entire rows of supply depots flattened, dozens of burst fuel drums, smoke rising miles into the air, artillery positions melted by strafing fire, tents shredded, vehicles overturned, craters across the jungle edge, no organized formation of troops remaining. One intelligence officer whispered as he examined them, This is one aircraft group? Not a fleet? Not a battleship bombardment?" "No," the analyst replied. 6 planes. 6 modified planes." Another officer said, "This is impossible." But it wasn't. It was Pappy Gunn. The Japanese reports. A single unit destroyed us. Intercepted Japanese communications painted an even darker picture. One message read, "A mysterious American aircraft formation attacked. Weapons unimaginable. Our forces were annihilated." Another, "Our troops were hit by a type of aircraft never seen before. It fires like a battleship." And the most haunting of all, in 15 minutes, we lost the ability to continue the operation. They weren't exaggerating. The Japanese had counted on those troops to form the backbone of their New Guinea offensive. Now they were gone, not scattered, not disorganized, destroyed. The strategic impact. A campaign collapses. That force at Gasmata represented months of planning by the Japanese High Command. It was meant to reinforce coastal garrisons, cut off American supply lines, support Japanese naval operations, pressure Port Moresby, push deeper toward Allied positions. With one 15-minute strike, all of that collapsed. Thousands of trained soldiers were dead. Thousands more wounded or missing. Supplies were turned into ash. Landing craft were unusable. Command structure was wiped out. An entire offensive, one that could have cost thousands of American lives, evaporated. And the Allies suddenly realized they possessed a weapon that Japan had no answer for. The controversy. High Command is furious. You might think Gunn would be celebrated immediately, but that's not how military bureaucracies work. His commanding officers were furious. Why? Because Gunn's tactics were unauthorized, illegal under Air Corps doctrine, dangerous, unsanctioned, and potentially repeatable by others without oversight. One general slammed the table. "You violated every rule of bomber doctrine." To which Gunn replied, "I destroyed the enemy." Another officer demanded, "Why did you modify government aircraft without permission?" Gunn answered, "Because permission is slow. The Japanese aren't." It wasn't the kind of answer the Army Air Forces like to hear, but they couldn't argue with the results. The shift in air warfare, a new era begins. The Gasmata strike proved something that would reshape the Pacific Air War. Low-level attack bombers with heavy forward firepower were devastatingly effective. After the strike, generals wanted more modified B-25s. Engineers wanted to study Gunn's design. Pilots begged to join his unit. Intelligence officers wanted more missions like it. Commanders reconsidered how to attack supply lines. Allies realized island defenses could be shredded at low altitude. And suddenly something astonishing happened. The U.S. Army Air Forces officially adopted Gunn's illegal idea. They began mass-producing gunship B-25s, skip bombers, low-level attack aircraft, B-25H models with 75mm cannons, B-25J models with 14 forward-facing 50-cal guns. Gunn's illegal prototype became the blueprint for the most feared bomber attacks of the war. The B-25 was now part bomber, part gunship, part ship killer, part terror weapon, and it began with one unauthorized modification in a dusty Australian hangar. At the Japanese response, fear and confusion. Japanese officers tried to understand what happened. Was it a new American aircraft? A secret weapon? A new tactic? A temporary fluke? A reconnaissance strike? A larger fleet hiding behind the horizon? Their reports are filled with confusion. It fires continuously, not like a bomber. The aircraft attacked as if it were a fighter. We expected bombs from above. They came from the side. Our guns could not bear fast enough. One officer wrote, "We were attacked by flying warships." The psychological effect was enormous. Japanese troops began to fear low-flying American gunships that could appear at any moment. That fear slowed operations and changed Japanese planning. Gunn's men, the heroes who made it happen. While Gunn got much of the recognition, his crews played a crucial role. These men trusted a pilot who broke rules, flew into heavy danger, skimmed tree lines, faced the risk of engine failure at 20 feet, accepted a mission with near-suicidal odds. One gunner recalled, "We didn't follow him because the plan was smart. We followed him because he always came back." Another, "He believed in what he built. And when a man believes like that, you go with him." Their courage was extraordinary. Without them, the attack could not have succeeded. The legend grows. Word spread quickly among Allied troops. "Did you hear what Gunn did? They wiped out a regiment in minutes. One strike stopped the whole Japanese push." Those modified B-25s, they're monsters. Even General MacArthur, known for his ego, reportedly said, "Gunn has done more with 6 planes than some commanders do with 6 divisions." The legend of the illegal B-25s was now unstoppable. The strike that changed the Pacific word of the Gasmeta attack spread far beyond the Southwest Pacific. Within days, reports were circulating through every major Allied headquarters. A single formation eliminated an entire regiment. The Japanese offensive stalled. A radical new bomber tactic had emerged. The B-25. Mitchell had proven more valuable than anyone expected. The U.S. Navy wanted details. The Royal Australian Air Force demanded a briefing. Even British officers in India requested documentation. Everyone wanted to know, how could 6 medium bombers do what normally required a naval task force? The answer was simple. They were no longer medium bombers. They were something new. Washington reacts. This is not standard procedure. When the reports reached Washington, D.C., high-ranking officers were uncomfortable. The strike was impressive, but it highlighted 3 major problems. 1, a pilot had modified a government aircraft without authorization, strictly illegal. 2, he had created a tactic not approved by doctrine, potentially dangerous. 3, the attack succeeded because he broke the rules. A bureaucratic nightmare. A general famously said, "We cannot encourage pilots to invent their own airplanes." But he followed it with, "However, we must study this immediately." The U.S. Army Air Forces didn't want mavericks. But they also couldn't ignore the most successful strike of the year. So they compromised. They didn't praise Gunn publicly, but behind closed doors, they gave him everything he needed. The birth of the gunship era. After the Gasmata mission, engineers began examining Gunn's aircraft. They realized something extraordinary. His modifications weren't crude improvisations. They were brilliantly engineered. The forward-firing firepower was so overwhelming that even large ships couldn't stand up to it. Within months, the U.S. began producing B-25G and B-25H, the official gunship bombers. These models included a 75mm nose cannon, up to 14 forward-facing 50 cal machine guns, reinforced armor, improved low-altitude stability, bomb racks for parafrags, better engines. Suddenly, the U.S. had a new weapon, a flying destroyer escort. These aircraft devastated Japanese convoys, troop landings, barge traffic, coastal bases, island fortifications, fuel depots, airfields. The Gasmata strike became the prototype for hundreds of similar operations. The Pacific Air War would never be the same again. The Japanese command, a desperate search for answers. Japanese intelligence scrambled to understand the attack. Their reports concluded: 1. Americans had developed a new assault bomber. 2. It fired continuously like a warship battery. It attacked too low for AA guns. It destroyed landing forces before they dispersed. 5. It threatened all future troop movements. 6. It was impossible to counter with existing tactics. In a meeting recorded in Japanese archives, one officer said, "If this weapon is used widely, we cannot reinforce the islands." He wasn't wrong. Within a year, Japanese logistics collapsed across New Guinea as B-25 gunships tore through shipping lines. What began as one illegal mission became a strategic nightmare for the entire Japanese empire. The men who saw the beach, testimonies of survivors. Decades later, historians interviewed Japanese survivors of Gasmata. One private said, "We heard thunder, then men started falling. We didn't see any aircraft at first." A sergeant recalled, "The air turned sharp, like needles, then everything exploded." Another survivor described the parafrags. "They floated down, small white flowers, then the world split open." Some soldiers said they tried fleeing into the jungle, only to be hit by blasts behind them as fuel depots ignited. One officer concluded, "We did not fight a battle that day, we were executed." These testimonies were haunting, but they confirmed the scale of the devastation. Why the attack was so devastating. The 3 factors. Military historians agree that 3 elements made the Gasmata strike uniquely lethal. 1. Total tactical surprise. The B-25s flew below. Radar beams, visual detection, sound range. The Japanese had no early warning. When the B-25s appeared, they were already firing. 2. The formation was vulnerable. The troops were assembled in the open, tightly grouped, preparing to board landing craft, loaded with ammunition, without foxholes, without cover, without dispersion. It was the worst possible moment to be attacked. 3. Guns, flying machine guns, were designed for mass casualties. The combination of forward-firing 50 cal guns, parafrags, skip bombs, incendiaries, ultra-low altitude created a perfect storm of destruction. If Gunn had attacked from 10,000 feet, the strike would have failed. If he had used standard bombs, the troops could have taken cover. If he had followed doctrine, the landing force would have lived. The attack worked because it broke every rule. The personal cost. Gunn's silence after the strike. After the mission, while his men celebrated, Gunn stayed unusually quiet. One pilot said, "He looked like he was carrying something heavy." Another, "He didn't smile, not once." Why? Gunn knew what the strike had done. He knew the human cost. He knew thousands of men never made it off that beach. He wasn't proud. He wasn't triumphant. He was effective. And sometimes effectiveness in war comes with a price. The legacy of the Gazmeta strike. The legacy of this mission is enormous. It derailed a Japanese offensive, reshaped Pacific air tactics, inspired the B-25 gunship family, proved low-level strikes could wipe out large formations, made Pappy Gunn a legend, changed how the Allies attacked island targets. Military academies still analyze the mission as a case study in improvisation, asymmetrical advantage, shock tactics, innovation, battlefield psychology. The Japanese never forgot it. Neither did the Americans who survived it. At the final truth, when innovation meets desperation, the story of the illegal B-25 is not just about a daring strike. It's about what happens when a pilot refuses to accept limitations, when creativity beats doctrine, when necessity forces innovation, when one man's anger and brilliance change the course of a campaign. In 15 minutes, Pappy Gunn destroyed an entire enemy force. In doing so, he reshaped the Pacific War and proved once again that history is often changed not by committees, not by doctrines, but by individuals bold enough to break the rules.